Good reports are still coming in from Africa with the gospel meetings. I think we've had 3 or 4 gospel meetings that were ending today. And one in Kenya. They sent us a picture and a report of 2 or 3 obeying the gospel. One elderly gentleman. I think we had to have a little help to get him in the water and out of the water, but he obeyed the gospel of Christ. And then another place, I think they'd had 2 baptisms. And then we heard from Vinjero in Malawi this morning, and he said that they had reported 53 baptisms. They had just finished a gospel meeting with some of the students, and they're going out later on to do more. But they're getting ready right now for the big meeting that we'll have, that will start next Friday. The students, they've got about 45 graduates of the school. They're coming, most of them, for the meeting, and they're going to try to get there 3 to 5 days early. They're going to go out in the community, hand out flyers, invite people to come and try to set up Bible studies. So we'll have a good crowd. They're expecting 15,000. We don't know. Last year it was 12,000. So I'm thinking they may be right. There may be 15,000 there, and that is a huge group of people. I wish you could be there and see it and be a part of it. It's just unbelievable how many people are there. And they love coming and hearing the gospel preached and proclaimed, and we usually have pretty good results as well. Be opening your Bibles to Genesis chapter 14 as we continue our study. Looking at Abram, and as I said, I'll switch back and forth calling him Abram and then calling him Abraham. His name hasn't officially been changed yet, but when we think about him, we think about Abraham. So I have a tendency to do that. We see that in the process of time, it talks about this king who makes it hard on the folks in the areas of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is down around the Dead Sea on the western bank of the Dead Sea. And we're introduced to this king, Chedorlaomer, and he causes great persecution to the people. And in the 13th, he rules with an iron fist. And in the 13th year, the people rebel, which seems to be, people don't like to be in tyranny. The children of Israel didn't like being in Egyptian bondage. Make your own bricks. Now go get your own straw. And just get harder and harder and harder. People don't like that. So there was a rebellion. And in the 14th year, this king united with other of his allies, and he's going to go into the areas of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's going to punish them. He's going to destroy them. He's going to take all of their goods and spoil them, as they refer to it a lot of times. The spoils of war. Go in and take all the gold, the silver, everything that's precious. And in that day and time, unfortunately, that meant also human trafficking. That meant taking a lot of the women as slaves and a lot of the young men as slaves as well. So this is what we're looking at. And you find in verses 8 and 9 that the local kings fight back. Now we normally think about, when we think about a king and a queen, I guess, I know I do, I think about the Queen of England, a king, somebody big and powerful. But during this was tribal kings. This would be like the king of Pygfold, the king of Mount Crest, and the king of Lusk. You got just little regions, and you would have kings. It's not like being the king in Tennessee or the king in the United States. You had kings that were just spread out, and they didn't have a big following, but they were referred to as the king. And in Africa, they usually don't do that. It's chief. Every little village has a chief. And then there's a regional chief. And the chief is over there Somewhat like a mayor, the chief can hold court. They don't usually do criminal cases. If you're being tried for murder, you don't go to the local chief. But if there's a dispute, well, this cow's mine. No, it's not. It's my cow. You go before the chief and present your case. And if nothing else, the chief will kill it and half it with you if he can't figure out what to do. He does things like that. So here you have these small kings that might not have over a few hundred or even a few thousand followers. But they're going to unite with the bigger king, and they're going to go over there and they're going to take them and cause them to suffer. The local kings and the local people in verse 8 and 9, they fight back. And, they're not going to let them come in and take everything they own without a fight. But they're outnumbered. And a lot of these situations like this, you didn't have trained soldiers. It was a lot like it was with the American Revolutionary War. You had just the Minutemen. You had guys that never had been trained. They were just farmers, but they knew how to shoot a gun. So they were soldiers. And a lot of these guys knew how to take a sword or an axe or something and defend themselves, but they weren't trained soldiers. Now, I don't know if this other kings maybe were a little bit better trained, but they go over and they fight and they take everything that they have. They were defeated. In verse 10, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, they were defeated and they fled. They ran. I guess they ran for their lives. And they go into the mountains. And probably in the mountains they could maybe hide in some of the caves or have a little bit more peace from all of the situation. They take all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the victuals, the food, and they went their way. Well, when they went in and they pillaged an area, they took everything of value. As I said, this is called the spoils of war. The old expression we've heard all of our lives, to the victor go the spoils. And that happened during the Civil War. If the Northerners came in and took a city, they took everything of value out of it. If the Southerners took a city of the Northern, they take everything and take all the cattle, all the sheep, all the chickens, everything they could find, and take it with them. So that's the spoils of war. Now, we're not to the point yet with the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. We're just being introduced to them here. We're going to learn in just a few chapters later that they were very, very wicked people in those cities. In fact, so bad that a particular sin is referred to by the city. The sin of sodomy comes from this particular sin that people were guilty of, lots of people living in this particular area. So the kings, they fight, they lose, they fled to the mountains, and Sodom and Gomorrah are spoiled. Everything of value is taken. Some things you can't carry when you're an army coming through. You can't carry the real estate. You can't take the land. You can't take houses. But any piece of gold or silver or precious stone, you can take all the food. You can take all the livestock. If they had any good clothing, you could take that and leave those people there defeated, and they don't have anything. Well, the people, the kings there, made a mistake. They messed with Abraham's nephew, Lot. And the Bible tells us that Lot was also destroyed. His stuff was taken captive. They take Lot, Abram's, and he's referred to as Abram's brother, son, here, his nephew. But through many of the verses, like verse 14, Abram heard that his brother was taken captive. But the word brother, oftentimes in the Old Testament, just has reference to one who is of close kin, is the idea, my clan, my family member. And the word sometimes, if you have to check the context in studying the Old Testament, the word son is used like that. That it was his son that did so-and-so, when in reality it's his grandson. Or it might have been his great-grandson. But don't we consider our grandsons and great-grandsons sons? I mean, they're family. That's my son. Well, it's my great-grandson, but still, that's my son. So that was a part of it as well. He's referred to as his brother's son, then he's referred to as his brother. You remember in the previous chapter when there was a dispute, he said, we be brethren. In other words, he said, we're family. Family ought to be able to get along with each other. And we ought to be able to work this out. And you look and you go where you want to go, and I'll take the other side and go to the other place. So they take Lot. Lot's wealthy as well. Abraham's very wealthy, and so is Lot. Now, Abraham's not in that general area. He's over in another area right now, or they would probably have tried to take him. But Lot's there. Remember, he pitched his tent towards Sodom. So he's right there in the midst of all of that, and he may have been one of the wealthiest men there. So obviously they're going to take everything they can from him. So they take all that he has and take him captive as well. So you take all of value, then you take the men, you take the women for slaves, and that's what happens. So Lot and his family and all their goods are taken. And then one escapes and gets back to Abram and told him what had taken place. Word comes to him, and he's now aware that Sodom and Gomorrah had been captured, and that his nephew has been captured, and all that they have has been taken. Well, that meant a lot to Abraham. Not only is that his nephew, that's family, but all of the goods and everything that he had, it was sort of like it was part of Abraham's. I helped you get started. Those cattle, I gave you those cattle, those sheep. We worked together and did all this. So I feel a real strong part of this situation, and he's going to do something. In verse 14, Abram heard that his brother was taken captive. He armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them to Dan. Now I want you to, we touched on this a few weeks ago, but I want you to think about this for a moment. Back at that particular time, lots of times, families were sort of clannish and they lived together. Maybe there's 10 kids and they all got kids and grandkids, and then their parents, and you get your mother-in-law and your aunt and uncle on your mother's side, and all of them, they're in this clan living together. And there's safety in doing it that way. And there's security from the standpoint of help. When you're sick and you're by yourself, who's going to help you? If you've got family members here, somebody's going to come in and help you. You need somebody to help take care of your children, you've got somebody there. It's time to plant the crops. Well, I can't do it all by myself. You help me plant mine and I'll help plant yours. So there was a lot of safety and comfort in having those families like that together. So Abraham arms his servants. How many servants did he have? Well, he had 318 that were capable of fighting. If all you had was 318 hired servants, you'd be pretty well off, wouldn't you? You're rich to have had that many men working for you that's in your clan, so to speak, and some of them probably are related to him and all, but 318. And how many hired servants did he have? Well, I don't know. But if he had 318 that were capable of fighting, and they had big families, there was probably more than that weren't capable of fighting. Kids, little kids. And then you've got the women. They didn't take the women to fight. The older women, the older men that couldn't fight, and then the younger women that wouldn't fight. So I don't think we're stretching anything to say he had over 1,000 hired servants. That's a big crew. That's like some little towns in our part of the country, isn't it? That's your clan. You're the leader of that clan. You're going out and saying, now today we're going to go over, I want you and you to go over and do this, and you go over and do that, and you're sort of the foreman of all of this. This is your group. How'd you like to feed 1,000 people? That wouldn't be an inexpensive thing, would it? To have enough, you'd have to have enough livestock, goats, sheep, and cattle to feed them, and plant some things occasionally so you could do that. Water, it'd take a lot of water to bathe that many folks and to have cooking water and also water for the livestock. So Abraham, when we talk about him being rich, he didn't just own a lot of things in the bank as we would think about today. He was wealthy in cattle and sheep and oxen and gold and silver. He was a very wealthy man. So he arms these guys, 318 of them. Well, that may suggest to us that the kings that came down and pillaged and took them captive, it wasn't 1,000,000 of them that came down. Maybe they were a similar size. I don't know exactly what size, but he's going to go and fight and get his family back. Now, we learn from studying the Bible in battles, when you're studying warfare in the Bible, all the rules go out the window. It doesn't always go to the mightiest army. It doesn't go to the strongest and the ones that have the most. We remember David and Goliath. We remember the Assyrians that came upon God's people, and God sent an angel and smote 186,000 of them in one night. Remember Gideon. You got too many soldiers. Get rid of some of them. And all of them carry a torch and something to break, and you go in and you shout and you break this and make all this noise, and the enemy's confounded. They think they're surrounded by 500,000 people, and they're running around killing each other and don't know what to do. So the Bible, it doesn't always go to the strongest the way you would think it was. So he gets his group together, and he's going to have a strategy in verse 15. Now, I don't know Abraham, what military background he had or other fighting that he had, living in a land where there's Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, all these people that would try to steal from them, and maybe would come in occasionally and try to steal some of their people, even take them captive and spoil them. So he may have had some bouts before. Look at verse 15, at his strategy. He divided himself against them and his servants by night, and he smote them and pursued them unto Horeb, which is on the left hand of Damascus. He divided into two different groups, and he did it by night, when you would think that we're not going to do anything. It's the end of the day, we're sleeping, we're resting, we're reclining at our tents, and some of them are going to hit you from this side, and some are going to hit you from that side. That's a pretty good strategy. Did it at night, divided into two groups, and they won. This worked. Of course, God was with him. It would have worked if there'd have been half as many of them. Because God wants Abraham to win, and he's going to win this battle. And they bring back all the goods. Also brought, again, his brother Lot, and they're using it as a close family member. It's actually his nephew, his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So they had stole their women and their people. They had stolen a lot of them to be slaves. And he brings them all back. Everything that Abraham had, he brought it back. They pursued after these folks, and they beat them. They took all of Lot's goods and brought them back. And they took all the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, all their goods, and brought back. And it would appear, we'll look a little bit later when we move over in the chapter just a little bit more, it would appear that Lot's army spoiled them, took their goods. In other words, they started out with certain things that they didn't steal from Lot and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. But now that they've been caught, we're going to take everything they got. And they did. And they spoiled them. And we'll see how that was divided or what was done with it a little bit later on. The king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Kedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him at the valley of Sheba, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and was the priest of the Most High God. So he is priest and king. He was, we look at some other places, he was king of Salem and priest of Jebus. And sometimes it was referred to as the old name, Jebus Salem. And that was switched around a little bit later on. Instead of Jebus Salem, it was Jerusalem That's where we're talking about. So he is the king and priest. Now, there's some parallels that we learn in regard to Melchizedek and Christ. And we read from Hebrews chapter 7, and we're going to go back there. So you might want to flip over to Hebrews chapter 7 and hold your finger there, or mark it. We're going to look at being introduced to Melchizedek. Now, in the book of Hebrews, the Hebrew writer is writing, talking to the people of God, the Christians, and telling them that they don't need to turn away from Christianity back to Judaism. They need to remain faithful and keep on being Christians. And we're introduced to Melchizedek here in Hebrews chapter 7, who is the king and priest of Salem, of the Most High God, and he even, as was read in our hearing, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings. Well, that's where we are right now in the book of Genesis. We're just reading about that. And as we said, he's priest and king. Now, he was not, this is before Abraham's seed. This is before you've got Isaac and Jacob, and you've got the 12 sons, and you've got the Levitical priesthood. This is way before that. But he is priest, but not of the Levitical order. Now, the book of Hebrews makes it very plain. From Hebrews 7 and verse 14, it's evident that our Lord sprang out of the tribe of Judah, of which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood. Jesus is a priest, but not after the Levitical order. He was of the tribe of Judah. He was not of the tribe of Levi. So he couldn't be. But we have a great high priest. The book of Hebrews, time and time again, talks about our great high priest, our great high priest. Well, he's not a Levitical priest. He's a priest after the order of Melchizedek. This is a unique priesthood. A unique priesthood. And Jesus was a unique priest as well. And it refers to him, talks about him being without father and without descent, and without mother. The idea is that he's without pedigree. He's without genealogy. The Levitical priest, during the days of Christ, would say, well, I'm a priest because my father was so-and-so, whose father was so-and-so, whose father was all the way back to Levi. And I'm a priest. So this priesthood is not by pedigree. This priesthood and him being in this position was not because he was born in that position. This was something that God set in place in and of itself. Very unique. And it says that Abraham gave a tenth of the spoil to Melchizedek. So here you have the Levitical tribe is in the loins of Abraham. So in a sense, the Levitical tribe is paying tithe to Melchizedek. So that would indicate that he's greater, and that his priesthood is greater. And Christ was a priest after the order of Melchizedek. So we can do some study there and look at that. I won't spend a whole lot of time there. But remembering that he is of the tribe of Judah, and he could not have been a priest here on earth. Melchizedek pays tithes, or Abraham rather pays tithes to Melchizedek. And he blessed Abram, and he said, blessed be the Most High of God. He delivered thine enemies into thy hand, and gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abraham, give me the persons, and take the goods for thyself. The king of Sodom recognized that he's in a position not to be making any bargain or any demands. You're the one that went over and took everything away from these enemies of ours, and you brought our people back, maybe our sons, our daughters, our wives, and you brought all of our goods back. So I guess he's under the opinion and the impression that Abraham's going to keep all the goods. He deserved them. He's the one that went over and got it and brought it back. So he says, just give me the people, give me the servants, and you can take all the possessions that are there. And then he said, I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet. I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich. He said, I don't want any of it. Well, that's unusual. That's usually why you would go over there to get it to start with. Let's go over there and spoil them and get all their stuff and we'll be rich. No, he went over there to get his nephew back. And he says, I don't want it. Now, he made some friends with some folks on that day, didn't he? He could have taken everything they owned, but he didn't. He gave everything they owned back to them. He gave them their sons, their daughters, their wives, and let them have them back. So he did a lot of good for himself, and he's very wealthy to start with. And in essence, he says, "I don't need anything else. I'm fine. Don't give me anything. I don't want it. I won't even take a piece of leather shoe latch. I don't want anything." Lest you say that Abraham got rich off of your back, so to speak, and he didn't want that. Now he did say, notice in verse 24, and this was good on his part, save only that which the young men have eaten. In other words, we went over there, we pursued them, we took all the livestock, and we were hungry. We ate cows, we ate sheep, probably had feast. And the portion of the men, and the portion of the men which went with me. So he says, let them take their portion. They risked their life. They went over there. They fought. They've eaten some of the livestock, so we're not going to pay you for that. And let them have some of the spoils, because they were the soldiers that did this. And I'm sure that the people would gladly say, yes, we'll. You'd rather give somebody 10% or 20% of everything you had than lose it all, hadn't you? So that's sort of the situation where they were. Abraham makes a covenant in chapter 15 with God. I'm going to move on through in just a few minutes because there's not a whole lot in this chapter that I want us to spend the time with. But chapter 15, Abraham is saying in verses 1 and 2, he said, is the steward of my household, is he going to be my heir? Am I going to have to leave everything to him? And God had told him his seed would be plentiful, and he hadn't had any children yet. So he's asking God, is this going to be my heir? My number one servant? I'm going to turn everything over to him. And God said, no, that's not going to be your heir. You're going to have a son. Well, we just keep waiting and waiting, and the chances of me having a son get slimmer and slimmer. Nearly 100 years old. Well, that's fine. Let's wait until you're 110, 120, or 150. Then you'll have a better chance of having a son. No. The longer they wait, the less the chance of having a son. Same way with Sarah. She's getting up around 90 years old at this point. And you're going to have a son. The promise is made. God's going to fulfill the promise. And isn't that interesting that God fulfilled it on his time frame? What if Sarah had a child when she was 35 years old? She'd been barren all those years, and God calls Abraham when he's 35, 40 years old, and says, so you're going to have a child. And then Sarah, sure enough, at age 35, she has a baby. Is that a child of promise, or is that natural occurrence? You wouldn't know, would you? But when she's 90 years old, that's a different story. Yeah, I know, but that's not normal. And God's going to do everything on his time frame. You want to do it on your time frame? You want to have this child now? God says, no, we're going to wait. We'll do it. We'll do it later. No hurry. He takes him out in verse 5. He brings him out, told him to look toward the heavens. He looks up and he sees the stars. He said, if thou be able to number them, he said unto them, so shall thy seed be. I just want one. I just want a son. One. And you're showing me the sky is full of stars. There's millions and millions of them up there. And you're going to give me that many? Let's get the one first. But he didn't understand what God was saying to him. That through his seed, all nations of the earth would be blessed. That would be the physical, all the Israelites, and it would be spiritual as well. He believed the Lord, verse 6, and counted him for righteousness. That's what we keep saying about Abraham, his great faith. And in the book of Hebrews it said he staggered not at the promises of God. God made all these promises to him. Okay, I believe you. You're going to do it. You're going to do what you said. God identifies himself in verse 7 as the God that brought him from the Ur of Chaldees and showing him the land that he's going to inherit. And then verse 8, he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit this? That's a reasonable question. I'm going to inherit all this land. How will I know that? And he tells him to take a heifer of so old, and he offers it up in sacrifice to God. God makes a covenant with Abraham. And God doesn't back out on his covenants. God always keeps his word. And in this telling him of what's going to take place, he opens back the curtains of time, not only in telling him you're going to have a son, but your descendants are going to be like the stars of the heaven, and then they're going to be captives in a strange land, and they're going to serve there in rigor for 400 years. There's Egyptian bondage. Even before his first child is born, Egyptian bondage is going to be a reality. And you're going to be there for 400 years. And you're going to serve that nation. And I'll judge that nation. And then you'll come out with great substance. Well, that's what happened, didn't it? They came out with great substance. But I find that interesting. Even before the first child is born and the promise gets started, God shows him about the 400 years of captivity. All right, so God makes the covenant with him. We'll stop there and see in chapter 16, Abraham and Sarah sort of got ahead of themselves and tried to help God out of a difficult situation. And they'll help him have a child a different way.